Immediately, the Zygon invasion did not jump out at me. The only interest I have in this story solely depends on its TV counterpart. Whereas here we have a squished down, simplified take on a two-parter that needs time to breathe. What makes the Zygon invasion so interesting to me is the political drama of it, this slow boiling plot and this kind of moral story at its center. What you get here is more of a simplified version of that. Despite keeping almost the same dialogue everywhere, this novel kind of dumbs it down to human good, Zygon bad, albeit humanizing the Zygons a little bit more. Here, the Zygon splinter group led by Bonnie is seen more as a kind of group of children that were not told what to do. They were not told how to assimilate into human life. But like I said, that doesn't reflect badly on the humans. That reflects badly mostly on the Zygons. They didn't allow their children to understand what they were getting themselves into. So they still come across as just kind of retaliating children crying out, which is what they are seen as in the episode as well. But it would have been nice to see kind of what the humans did wrong as well. This was not a perfect arrangement that they made, so it would have been nice to look deeper into that. The Zygon Invasion by Peter Harness was released on the 13th of July 2023 alongside The Waters of Mars, Kablam, Planet of the Ood and Warrior's Gate. Peter Harness originally wrote such a haunting tale of human-alien conflict, but somehow failed to assimilate that, or translate that rather, into this medium. I'd love to see what Harness's thoughts are on his own novelization, because in my opinion it falls quite far from the original atmosphere that the televised story gave us. I've spoken many times about what I believe makes a good novelization, whether that's genuinely new material like Dalek, or just a different way of writing it like the Crimson Horror. The Zygon Invasion novelization is still an interesting read, but it lacks that new spark, kind of like Planet of the Ood. To make this book interesting, to make people want to genuinely keep the book, there needs to be something interesting, something unique compared to the original episode. Now, for those that are aware, the Zygon Invasion and the Zygon Inversion is a two-parter, so Peter Harness had to clump together two 45-minute episodes, whereas most people don't have the 90-minute constraint that he would have had in this book. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's actually one of the smaller Target novelizations. I don't know for sure, it just feels a lot smaller than some of the other ones. Now, even though this novelization genuinely is much more interesting than the Planet of the Ood novelization, it just leaves me disappointed. Now, I might be being a bit too harsh with what I'm saying here. It does try to add some new stuff, but when it does, it feels like a waste of time because you're cramming so much story into such a small book that whenever there's elaboration and whether there's slightly new material, what follows that is, oh my god, we need to catch up with the plot of this book, otherwise it's gonna be like 50 pages longer, which is what it should be. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, I don't know what the constraints are when they're writing these novelizations, don't get me wrong. I'm sure it can be quite difficult and I'm sure they're put under a lot of pressure, but there's been longer novelizations, so why couldn't Peter Harness expand more? This story owes itself to looking more at the human-alien conflict, the human-Zygon conflict that is in the story. So it's a shame that there is the minor bits that get added, then are just followed by plot before we get to another little bit that gets added on it as well. I don't even think a lot of it is cut to make up some time. I don't even really notice when things are cut in these novelizations because they're obviously cutting less important parts, and I think there probably are some bits that Peter Harness could have cut from this story just to make it easier to expand on other points. But I'm pretty sure a lot of it isn't cut. There might be some bits here and there, like small dialogue changes, but no like scenes that are cut that probably could have been cut from the original story. But you know, like the same reason why you don't just get rid of a deleted like a scene in a TV episode is because you want to keep the pace going and stuff. Here in a novel, it makes a lot more sense to cut out certain things if it doesn't add anything too major to the story. You can cut it, you can imply it elsewhere, you can expand upon points that are actually interesting. I think it's a shame to see writers think that they can not necessarily get away with, but see their TV episode and just write it in a book and it be the same. Like, books are an entirely different medium in the same way that you've got audio stories and comics. Say, for example, you were doing a comic adaptation, which doesn't really make too much sense. You wouldn't just adapt that episode shot for shot. The main bits that Harness adds is stuff to do with Bonnie. Bonnie is, of course, the bad guy of this story. She takes the form of Clara, pretends to be Clara, and is kind of she's the ringleader of the splinter group of the Zygons that want to unmask all the Zygons and basically create war. Here, she is seen as waking up almost on a bus, and she's already in the form of Clara, so she doesn't take the form of Clara in the events of the Zygon invasion. She is given the form of Clara. We are told that the Zygons take the body print of the nearest human or something like that, and I just don't really understand, one, how is Clara the nearest human to a Zygon or whatever, and two, how is that allowed? How is it such a massive coincidence that Bonnie and her new friend Clyde has the body print of Danny? And this was, we don't know exactly the timeline of these events, but presumably this was before Series 8, just after the Day of the Doctor. I mean, it could be said that this was during Series 8, but at what point was there two Zygons near enough to Clara and Danny, and then they both get sent off to Truth and Consequences, which is where Bonnie was sent by the Zygon High Command to live out her life. You do get some interesting kind of bits where obviously she can't reach Clara's mind, but all of the Zygons around them can still eventually figure out the memories of their body print counterparts and learn from that. And so, I don't know, it all seems quite convenient. It all makes sense. You're like, oh yeah, of course, this is what happened. The Zygons didn't help them enough, so they fought back. But despite that, it was still interesting to see those moments where the Zygons are trying to experience human life. You got Bonnie and Clyde in a diner not understanding how money works and stuff like that. There's a moment in the episode where the Zygon in Truth and Consequences talks to Kate about a Zygon who couldn't preserve their body print. And I took it as it was her, and then the people got outraged, which is why she's kind of stuck around and she's kind of trying to get revenge or something like that. But it actually ends up being Danny's Zygon doppelganger Clyde who couldn't preserve his body print and actually gets killed by the humans, and that's kind of Bonnie's instigation into wanting to take revenge and just wanting to start a war against the humans. So it's definitely nice to see a bit more of a motive behind Bonnie's just craving for war. You do see her a little bit differently, because in the TV episode, she is kind of just seen as a soldier or a captain, I suppose. You don't even necessarily get the idea that she is the one calling all the shots. I mean, she is obviously, but you could see her as genuinely being a soldier and there being some other higher Zygon. But no, in this story it is revealed that she kind of began the splinter group. Despite these additions, they are kind of unwelcome, because as I mentioned before, it leads to the following chapters speeding through the plot as fast as possible. You just feel like you're watching the episode with minor dialogue changes, nothing really happening that's different. I think the Zygon inversion actually gets kind of crammed down even more. From what I could tell, the first part finishes a little bit further after the halfway point of the book, so you definitely get a bit more of the Zygon invasion and a bit less of the Zygon inversion. So it's definitely quite a difficult novelization to rate. You've got these additions that, like I said, feel a little bit unwelcome, because when I'm reading this story, I want a different take of it. I want a kind of slow burn. I want this and that. I know it's all kind of what I want, and I'm sure people can still enjoy this novelization. Definitely, don't get me wrong. But I view the Zygon invasion and the Zygon inversion in a particular way, and I do really like the original story. It's just it was just a shame to see that kind of atmosphere not translated the same into the novel. If it was longer, if there was kind of more talking, it would be a little bit interesting. I mean, the most famous part of the Zygon inversion is the Doctor's speech, and it's almost the same. They didn't change it at all, which is fine. I'm not expecting them to change it. It was just kind of a wall of text, and you're like, okay, if I didn't have the TV story to compare it to, this doesn't mean much to me, because Peter Capaldi carries that text carries that speech, and you just have to visualize Peter Capaldi doing it in this story. So like I said, you know, I view the Zygon invasion, the Zygon inversion in a particular way, and it wasn't to my taste like put down into this novel. So for that, I will be giving the Zygon invasion by Peter Harness a 5.5 out of 10. Wow. Okay. That was something. It wasn't going to last, you know. I think the Day of the Doctor and the Crimson Horror and even the Waters of Mars, they had some really, really strong parts. So it wasn't going to last forever. But like I said, you know, the Zygon invasion, it's not a weak story. The novelization is not a weak story. It's just not what I expected. So that's what, like, if I didn't care that much, it would be rated higher. But it's because I genuinely enjoyed the Zygon invasion and the Zygon inversion quite a lot. So it just disappointed me in that regard. That being said, up next is a story that I'm not really too bothered if it doesn't get novelized correctly. It's not a particularly memorable story from Series 10. It's The Eaters of Light by Rona Munro.